Good evening and welcome to the July 22nd, 2019 Planning and Development Meeting. We have a quorum. Yes. May we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of July 8th?
So moved.
May I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting minutes pass. We have, I'll do public comment with the item. P1, the Housing and Homelessness Commission and staff recommend City Council approve the 2019 Emergency Solutions Grant allocation totaling $151,731, $138,497 to two social service agencies, Connections for the Homeless and the YWCA, that provide housing and services for individuals and families who are homeless or at risk of homelessness, and $11,380 to the City of Evanston for grant administration. Funding source is the city's 2019 Emergency Solutions Grant entitlement allocation in the amount of $151,731 from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, with individual account members for external agencies funded and city administrative costs. This is for action.
Move approval.
May I have a second? Second. Thank you. We have public comment. We have first Ms. Tina Payton, and then Mr. Carlos Sutton, and then James Engelman. Are you speaking on P1? No? Okay. Okay. In that order. Thank you. And we have 3 minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Tina Payton for Payton Properties. So I'm coming here again to speak about the Emergency Solutions Grant for Connections for the Homeless. It's 1 year later, and I'm still asking for the $6,950 that Connections for the Homeless owes for the ESG. As you can see from the letter that I gave you, Connections actually agreed to pay me the money, and I've gotten no cooperation from the city or Connections about this money. I've asked also Sarah Flax for the memo from last year, from August 13, 2018 meeting, that I believe was a deciding factor in your decision to approve the money for Connections without giving me my share of the money that was owed. So I'm hoping tonight that you will decide to release the funds, the $6,950 to Payton Properties, which we were owed from last year. And I'm also asking publicly again for Sarah Flax to give me the memo or the documents that were submitted to City Council August 13, 2018. And it's very important. My family has provided affordable housing for over 50 years here in Evanston. And it will be a very terrible shame that we cannot get cooperation one more time from the City of Evanston about fairness and equity. This is what we've been talking about at City Council, about fairness and equity. And I believe that I will have to come public about the unfairness that the city has treated us. We've been sued 7 times by the City of Evanston. And how many millions of dollars have you spent harassing my family? And we can't even get the money that's owed to us here in black and white. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Payton. Mr. Carlos Sutton?
Good evening, Carlos Sutton, 5th Ward. First, I want to agree with the request for Mrs. Payton that before any of the funds are approved under P1, that consideration should be given for outstanding debts and outstanding legal issues that have been applied to landlords who are being held accountable for tenants breaking the lease before the term was up and then holding the landlord. Secondly, I would like to encourage the connections to do a little thorough screening on prospective tenants, and mainly on maintenance and the importance of keeping the places free of bed bugs and things like that, little simple things like that. And last, if there any money is available, since for people who are moving in with the high rents that will be required, that will be available for applicants to apply for money for deposit securities to the landlords. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Okay, so James, you're not on P1? No? Okay. All right, I have comment. So I value the commitment to our workforce housing of Payton Properties, and I don't know what's going on. Ms. Payton has managed real estate for a very long time, and so has her family. And I feel confident that she knows how to reconcile her records. So I would need more information on why she hasn't been paid, if she has been paid, and definitely some clarification on what the miscommunication is. It's very difficult to find larger affordable rentals in town, and Ms. Payton is making them available, especially in the Fifth Ward. So I'm uncomfortable, and absolutely am celebrating the work that Connection is doing, but this is something that I'm unwilling to just brush by. So I don't know that this is an appropriate setting to discuss it, but I know that Ms. Payton was waiting for a meeting, and I would like to see that happen before we move forward. I think that it's important that we allow our property owners that are serving our workforce and providing housing, it's important that they feel confident in the service that they're getting. So I would just like us to have an understanding from both parties that there is an agreement before we continue moving forward. I don't want to dismiss the concerns of Ms. Payton. And if we have a final answer to share, then that's fine, but that's my position on it. So then I'm going to make a motion to hold this, and I would like to see a meeting with Payton Properties and Connections for the Homeless, and I would like, before voting on this, some agreement or an agreement to disagree, but not a unanswered concern from a resident and property owner and affordable housing leader in town. Is there a second? All in favor of holding it? Oh, perfect. Thank you. P2. Ordinance 74-019 is written for adoption of the proposed text amendment to the zoning ordinance to allow office uses and revise special conditions for office uses within R5 and R6 residential districts. The Plan Commission recommends denial of the text amendment. This is for introduction, and we do have 4 speakers on this. May I get a motion? Okay, in a second? Okay, first we have Harris Miller, then Carl Klein.
Good evening. Harris Miller, 4th Ward. Please oppose ordinance 74-019. I understand that office uses are already permitted in zones R5 and R6. This is another excuse by City Council to resurrect the library parking lot project. The text amendment will damage the neighborhood character, especially the Willard properties in an 1899 apartment building on Clark Street. These buildings already bring in an excellent tax base, according to other residents. Is there an alternative plan? Is this an alternative plan to cover the Robert Crown expenses? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Carl Klein?
Good evening. In the committee packet, it states, per the city zoning ordinance, the R5 General Residential District is intended to provide for infill development of a mix of multifamily residential structures at a medium density, including townhouses, two-family dwellings, three-story walk-ups, and courtyard apartment buildings that characterize the traditional multiple family housing development found in this district. Yes, office use is allowed in this zoning area and is considered a special use. Zoning Board of Appeals must consider specific standards before it votes on approval of this special use. Regarding all of this, I find this analysis from the city staff interesting. Quote, allowing office use in a less restrictive manner in areas that are adjacent to denser downtown areas has the potential to meet these goals and objectives. However, care must be taken to ensure that the building design and bulk does not conflict with the character of nearby residential uses. Otherwise, this could be seen as expanding the downtown into traditionally residential areas, unquote. So please keep the zoning the way it is. It seems to be working just the way it is now. So if nothing is broken, why attempt to fix it?
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Next, we have Joan Safford and then Janet Steidel. Excuse me.
Good evening, Joan Safford, 1618 Wesley in Evanston. The proposed text amendment would amend the Evanston zoning ordinance to permit new office buildings to be built as a special use on those lots in R5 and R6 districts that are adjacent to D2 or D3. Under the amendment, office buildings in those R6 areas could be built to a height of 85 feet, 97 feet if a planned development. City staff have identified 7 areas in R6 that are adjacent to D3 and D2 districts and therefore subject to the proposed zoning text amendment. There are apparently none adjacent to R5, although it's included in the amendment. This text amendment purports to have general application to all those properties adjacent to D2 and D3. However, as a practical matter, this text amendment is a special bill. It's the equivalent to spot zoning. The clear purpose, as recognized by the Plan Commission, is to apply it to the library parking lot. The other lots are occupied by structures which are well integrated into their established neighborhoods or have plans already in place, such as the Sojourner Church, or are more suited to residential development, such as the King Home. What is this a proposal except a maneuver to try again to build the office building on the library parking lot, or as a means of gaming the system? And those are the and those are the words of the Planning Commission. One advantage in skinning the cat this way is that even though the impact of the proposed zoning amendment will be profound, this text amendment can be accomplished with only notice in the Evanston Review. We all know the Evanston Review is not effective notice for the community. Moreover, by eliminating the need for a zoning change, the developers would be freed of the pesky requirement that if more than 30% of the neighboring property owners object, they need 7 council members' votes to approve the project, rather than 5. The proposal violates the purpose for a zoning amendment, which is, quote, not intended to confer special privileges or rights upon any person, but only to make adjustments necessary in light of changed circumstances or changes in public policy. And it fails to meet the standards for a zoning text amendment that, quote, the proposed amendment be compatible with the overall character of existing development in the immediate vicinity of the
15
subject
seconds.
property. The Plan Development Committee should not forward the ordinance to the council for introduction.
Thank you. And last, we have Janet. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Ms. Leonard. The Plan Commission's ruling not to recommend this zoning text amendment was clear and unambiguous. It was based on their conclusion that this text amendment was unnecessary and aimed at correcting a problem that just doesn't exist. If we've learned anything about office development over the past 3 years, it is that such development requires and deserves more thoughtful consideration than is demonstrated by this proposed text amendment. Tinkering with special uses in R6 zones is a very poor way to do planning for the downtown. If office buildings are what the city wants, then it should do a proper study of how to accomplish that goal. It should include an assessment of short and long-term benefits. It should identify appropriate locations for such infill in the downtown. And it should respect the city's established urban plans and zoning. I hope you will carefully consider the ramifications of such tinkering and the precedent it would set for land use throughout the entire city of Evanston. At the Plan Commission hearing, Commissioner Goddard stated that if a need for office use exists, the least appropriate place for it is in residential areas. I hope you will vote to support the Plan Commission's recommended denial of this text amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Alderman Fisk?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is something that I brought forward as a referral to the City Council. One of the things that we did learn throughout the entire discussion on the development on the library parking lot is that there are a number of people who are interested in office development in our downtown. And the last 2 times I have run on 2 issues. One is to try to increase the revenue to the city of Evanston so that we're not nickeling and diming the taxpayers of Evanston, but really making significant efforts to increase our revenue. And the second is to support our businesses in the downtown by bringing new office workers into the downtown to shop and dine. Over the years, when we were worried about never having another office building in the downtown, we opened it up to residential development. Residential development is not taxed at the same level that commercial development is. Commercial development will not only provide us with more tax revenue, but it also increases the value of the property to the person who's selling the property and therefore has a larger revenue to the city in terms of transfer taxes. The most important thing, though, that I've tried to tell people in my ward who have come to my ward meetings and followed these issues is that I feel very strongly in appropriate development for the downtown. The library lot development I felt was appropriate in terms of height and scale with R6 zoning. And when you look at R6 zoning and, for example, you look at D3 zoning, the height and the impact on a neighborhood is pretty much the same. This text amendment is not about the library parking lot. Yes, the library parking lot is affected by it, but it's not about the library parking lot. There are, I don't have the map right in front of me, but there are 5 or 6 parcels that are affected by this. All of them are right next to D zoning. They're within a matter of feet of our core downtown. They're all contained in the core downtown. This is an opportunity to have a lower scale office development that benefits the downtown. And I have heard from folks who have small businesses, the Chamber of Commerce, members of the Chamber of Commerce, members of downtown Evanston. Everyone is in support of more office in our downtown. We have probably 4 or 5, possibly 6 developers who are interested in bringing office uses into the downtown, and we have no place to put them. As the basis for my referral, And if you read the explanation of R6 zoning, the fact is that it is compatible with our downtown use. It is compatible with a more intense residential use. It's compatible with office use. And I don't see any reason in the whole world that this text amendment, which would not allow ground floor retail or commercial use, so visually it would be very compatible with the R6 uses around it, wouldn't be acceptable to everyone. But for the most part, these 5 or 6 uses, and I don't remember, I'm sorry off the top of my head how many they are right next door to or across the street from commercial uses. So visually, we're not talking about putting an office building in the middle of somebody's residential neighborhood. We're talking about the downtown. This is all within the central downtown core. And the fact is that we need the revenue. I don't care where the revenue is spent, but we need the revenue. And in my ward, we really need those shoppers. We need those office workers. So I brought this forward thinking that this is a way to consider making a contribution to meaningful revenue to the city. I don't want to be in the middle of a budget hearing and saying to people that we haven't tried. I don't want to be in the middle of a budget period saying to people, we're going to raise your parking rates any further, or we're going to raise your water rates or we're going to do this or that. I don't want to do that anymore. That's painful to people. I don't want to do that without trying. And that's why I'm up here, is to really take a look at revenue, really take a look at the possibilities with minimal impact on the surrounding properties in the downtown. So that's why I brought it forward. You can agree or disagree, but at least I've tried. So I'm sure we'll talk about this during the budget process, but I think this is a very reasonable position to take. Office uses are already permitted in R6. They just happen to be within a residential building. If you're going to have an office building in R6, it needs to be a previous residential building, I think no more than 2 stories. Am I correct, Director Leonard? I think that's what it is. We already have office uses in R6 that are not conforming, and we talked about that a little bit when we were talking about the library parking lot. So it's a matter of not only bringing our zoning ordinance into compliance with some of these uses, but also a matter of, can we attract more development that we need for not only the revenue, but also the feet on the street. And I think this is a very reasonable position to take. So I hope you'll support me on this.
Is there any further discussion? Alderman Ravel?
Well, having looked at the map of where the affected areas are, it seems to me that most of them are what I would describe as on the periphery of the downtown. And basically most of them have really solid, well-established residential structures already in place. So it's not clear to me that those are really desirable locations for a new office building. And frankly, I think our office development is really more appropriate in the core downtown area, where the tenants can more readily make use of our public transportation and contribute more directly to the increasing the vitality of the downtown. I agree definitely with Alderman Fisk that we want to increase the economic vitality of our downtown, have more people shopping and going to our restaurants. But the better place for this office density is in the downtown as opposed to on the periphery. I also think that by encouraging these office buildings on the periphery of the downtown, we would be expanding our downtown. If that's a desirable thing for us to do, then we should think about it in a more comprehensive way rather than doing it with this piecemeal approach. I mean, basically, I guess I don't agree with the rationale for this proposed amendment. I don't find it convincing, and I'll be voting no.
Thank you. Alderman Nguyen?
Well, I share Alderman Ravel's concerns about this. I also think that the Plan Commission did a very thorough discussion of this and denied it by a vote of 7-1. They raised a number of issues that Alderman Ravel just touched on in terms of not changing the zoning pattern in a piecemeal way, and that if we do need an analysis of potential locations for office uses, it should be done in a more comprehensive way, and I very much agree with that. You know, zoning is really like a jigsaw puzzle, and if you move or change the size of one piece, you really disrupt the whole jigsaw puzzle. And so if you're going to do that, then you should look at every piece. And I do want to support our Plan Commission and their thoughtfulness in all of this. So I will be voting no.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Alderman Rainey?
Thank you. Not so much in keeping with the zoning change, but when you somebody mentioned the tax parcels in the library parking lot district. When you examine those parcels, the square block where the library parking lot is over 70% tax exempt. The square block. When you look at that that square block and the square block across the street to the alley, it is the most perfect lot in the downtown area at this time, really, for an office building. It works perfectly. It's across the street from this Church Street garage. The parcels are crying out for a taxable property and an office building taxable property. So why we continue having this discussion about not putting an office building there is just so illogical. I just cannot believe why we keep beating this dead horse. We should bring it back to life, give it a transplant, and put out an RFP or an RFQ, or go beg some developer to come back and build an office building there. It only makes sense. You look at this, you look at the parcels, and you say, how could we make another mistake like this? How could we do that? Any next person who says, well, we're going to have 601 Davis, I'm just going to smack them, because it just makes no sense that we can't have two. I mean, this is crazy. We are just missing out on an opportunity. That lot deserves an office building. It is so perfectly located. Please, everybody, go home tonight and give some thought to this.
Thank you, Alderman Rainey. Alderman
welcome.
Fisk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I want to take exception to a couple of things that were said. These R6 zones are in the downtown core. They've already been defined. They were defined in 1993. This is downtown core. We're not talking about on the periphery of downtown. We're talking about in the downtown core. So the question is, how does the downtown core work for us? What are we trying to protect, if anything? Where do we want to develop? We deal with these issues all the time. 601 Davis is coming to us, and all the folks who were arguing about the how dangerous the alley is next to the library parking lot, and I want to emphasize that this text amendment is not about the library parking lot. But everyone who's talking about 601 Davis, there are 300 kids that use the alley behind 601 Davis to get to the Bright Horizons Daycare Center. I mean, we'll see who shows up here and argues about whether that alley is too busy to warrant that development. I mean, these are things that we think about up here. And the three aldermen, Alderman Braithwaite, Alderman Wilson, and myself, that have parts of the downtown, we spend a lot of time looking at how the downtown works. and what we need to bring into the downtown, and who is commenting to us about what they need in the downtown to try to stay in business. And Alderman Rainey is correct. That particular block has existed for years, 70% off the tax rolls. And maybe that's okay. But that doesn't mean that when we have a stable of developers who are looking to try to find a place to develop an office building, a moderately sized office building in the downtown, and they want to come to Evanston, they want to bring their businesses to Evanston and grow their businesses in Evanston, and we don't have a place for them, it makes sense for us to look for that. That's not spot zoning, that's not, R6 is intended to incorporate a lot of different uses together, a lot of different downtown uses together. So I understand, and Alderman Revelle and Alderman Nguyen, I know you want to be defending the library parking lot. That's fine, I don't care, but this is not about the library parking lot. This is about answering those people who want to come here and do business here and increasing revenue for the city of Evanston. And that is our responsibility up here. So I will not be voting in the budget process for any more nickeling and diming of our taxpayers when we have an opportunity to do something that's meaningful.
Any further discussion? All in favor? It was for introduction. Oh, yeah. We still vote on it? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? No. Motion fails? Motion fails. Absolutely. Oh, what is? Sure. Okay. Yep.
Alderman Fisk? Alderman Nguyen? Alderman Rees-Simmons?
No.
Alderman Suffredin? Alderman Revelle? Alderman Rainey?
Aye.
Yes, 2-4.
Okay. It fails 2-4? Okay. P3, Alderman Nguyen, will you take that, please?
P3, Ordinance 63-019, amending various portions of the City of Evanston zoning ordinance to update the definition of craft alcohol production facility. The Plan Commission and staff recommend City Council adoption of a zoning ordinance text amendment to revise language in the definition of craft alcohol production facilities. I move introduction.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? P3 passes. Alderman Rainey, will you take P4?
The Plan Commission and staff recommend adoption of Ordinance 77-019 for approval of a major adjustment to a plan development at 100 to 132 Chicago Avenue in order to add 2 dwelling units for a total of 28 dwelling units when office space was originally proposed in the mixed-use building approved by Ordinance 61-018 and extended by Ordinance 65-019. No changes will be needed to the approved site development allowance. I've asked suspension of the rules for introduction and action at the July 22nd, this meeting. So I move approval of introduction, and I'm asking for suspension of the rules so we can take action tonight.
Second.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
One of the interesting things, when you make changes like this, and it's hard to understand why this is such a major change, but this actually reduces the required parking. So it's pretty unusual. Anyway, so this is going to add 2 units of housing, which I think is tremendous. Mm-hmm. And the Plan Commission voted unanimously, and they were very, very complimentary about this change. So there was no controversy whatsoever. So hopefully you'll all support this.
Is there any further discussion? I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? P4 passes. 1 second. Alderman Rainey.
You have to, I think you have to ask for suspension of the rules, approval. I think.
What am I asking?
For suspension of the rules, if we approve.
Am I move suspending the rules for introduction and action to our council meeting later today?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Rules have been suspended, and we move it on to the council meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any items for discussion? Communication? May I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
May I have a second? Thank you. Motion is adjourned, and our city council meeting will begin at 7:45. Thank you.